Started, so we are live.
Yeah, all right. Well, if everybody's comfortable and happy to begin, we shall begin. So welcome to this consultation call with members of the Audit and Governance Committee. My name is Graham Bell. I'm the independent member and committee chair. I just wanted to start with a quick word of thanks. I know the events of last week sort of derailed a number of arrangements, not just in respect of this committee, but I think one of the things that governance should is be flexible. So I'd like to thank Gary and Paul and others for ensuring that we can still have a meeting and run through the relevant points prior to board meeting scheduled for next week. So,
excuse me, Chair. Can I just suggest that other members who aren't aren't speaking at the moment mute their microphones? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That's much better. Right. So in terms of attendees, can I just pass over to members just to say a quick hello and to introduce themselves? Can I pass over to you, Kevin, first?
Kevin Brady, independent member.
Thank you, Kevin. And over to you, Keith. I'm not sure Keith's connection.
Yeah, it's like I'm Cumbria, Vice Chair. Thank you.
We can hear you. Can't see you moving, Keith. Sorry. Hans, over to you.
In the interest of the programme, I've switched off my my camera for the time being.
Hans, good afternoon.
Yes, Hans Mundrick, Councillor, Warrington Borough Council.
Thank you. And over to Liam.
Good afternoon, everybody. Liam Robinson from Liverpool City Region Combined Authority.
Thank you. So that's all the members of the committee. We have apologies from Councillor Owen and David Pevelin, I believe. Andrew, is that correct? Is that everybody?
Yes, that's correct.
So in terms of other attendees, officers and invitees, Gary or Andrea, can you just run through the list just so that we have confirmation of who's actually on the call?
We have yourself, Chair, Graham Bell. We have Julie Openshaw, Paul Kelly, Karen Murray, Alex Heyer, Gary Rich, Keith Little, Liam Robinson, Campbell Dearden.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Let's not forget Andy. Andy's joined us as well. Yeah?
Sorry.
Andy's just joined us. Andy Rind as well.
Andy Rind from the DFT, Daniela, and myself.
Grand. Excellent. Hopefully we've not missed anybody. Done, welcome. And
I'm sorry. Excuse me. We've got David Spilsbury on the call as well, and Blessing from our communications department.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of declarations of interest, do any of the members have any interest in relation to agenda items that they need to state, or can we move on? Excellent, thank you. We'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting. I know Paul and I spoke just prior to the meeting there are a number of actions, points outstanding from the meeting. We'll cover those when we've run through the actual record of the meeting itself, if that's okay. I would like to make a quick point about the minutes, actually, before we start. We had a good level of discussion last time up in Manchester around a number of topics. And the minutes as written certainly provide a good basis to review and recall what was actually discussed. So I'd like to express my thanks for having them presented in that kind of fashion. So if we run through the minutes, the points within the minutes, the material points perhaps. Point 4, the appointment of new chair. Point 5, budget and business plan, which again was one of those subjects around which there was a fair amount of discussion. If everybody's happy, point 5. Point 6 was the monthly operating plan that related to the May version of that document. Point 7 was the draft statutory accounts, which are obviously covered again as part of this current meeting agenda. Point 8 is the internal audit update. Point 9 was the external audit update. And point 10, again, one of those items on last time that the meeting prior was risk management, generated quite a bit of discussion. But if everybody's happy with the detail as written. Okay, so I think we can confirm that the minutes from the last meeting are agreed. Paul, you said that you had a list of points outstanding that you wanted to run through.
Yeah, there were a number of matters arising from the minutes. So there was as you said, there was a lot of robust discussion, and we captured. Andrea's got a list of all the specific matters that required action between the last time that we met and now. And the intention would be to include those in the minutes of this meeting. So a combination of the actions and the matters arising. Sorry, these will be matters arising from the previous meeting. Andrew, if you want to throw them up onto the screen, just so we can just quickly whip through them, make sure everyone's comfortable that it captures everything. Yeah, can everyone see that? Was that a bit small? Or? Hopefully everyone can see that. So so just starting from the top, 8.3. So the item numbers in this note reference the minutes to which they refer. So 8.3 was the minutes of the last time that we met, and the point was about how do we get a stronger link between the audit plan, which is around our control environment, and a meeting's been had with our internal auditors about that, with the view to we're not saying that we haven't done it in the past, but I think we just need to be a little bit more transparent. So that point was taken on board, and we started that process for the plan for commencing April 23. Kevin picks up the point around the risks on the NPR business case, and its sort of migration into the co-sponsorship arrangement, so a new risk was captured to enhance the risks around that particular environment. Also, Kevin was asking around. Kevin, you asked a specific question around the co-sponsorship arrangement, and we just highlighted the fact that we are co-sponsors, but I think it's been recognised in the past that the department is the sole funder. So by definition, I think it's not realistic to acknowledge that. We will feed into the process, but we certainly wouldn't be able to drive the process. But obviously, our thoughts, our input are considered critical to the wider team. 10.6, there was one of the risks was amended as a consequence of the discussion, and equally, and again, and on 10.7, a mitigation action was raised within the risk register as a consequence of the point raised by Kevin. 10.8, again, yeah, new action raised, and then 10.9, there was a change in the profile of the risk that got raised as a consequence of the discussion. So hopefully they represent all the items that were raised by members last time that we met, and hopefully this is the best mechanism for capturing, I suppose, actions that you thought that you wanted to raise last time round and that they've been addressed. So we'll include these actions in the minutes, and therefore, if they, hopefully they will hit the markers to the point you raised. If they don't, then please air that, and we can treat it as an ongoing matter arising if needs be. Thank you.
Grand, thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any comments on that, either the detail or the approach? I think one of the I call it a drawback. It's the wrong word, I guess. But one of the drawbacks of having a robust discussion is that some of the points that are raised, those who raise those points, I guess, have a responsibility for remembering what they were and to carry them forward, because it's a shame for these things to get lost. So thank you, Paul, for capturing the detail that you have. So the next item on the agenda, I believe, is the risk review. So Daniela, presumably you're wanting to run through, summarize the detail that you've already shared.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to just run you through some of the changes that we've made to the risk management strategy this time round, and also the updates to the corporate risk register, and happy to sort of take any questions at the end of that. Can you all see the screen okay?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. So further to discussions that we've had with Chair and Audit and Governance Committee, we have incorporated the risk appetite for TFN, the risk appetite statement for TFN. This has also been discussed with sort of functional areas with TFN as well. And in terms of the sort of risk appetite, the Orange Book definition, it's the amount of risk that an organisation is prepared to accept, tolerate, or expose to at any point in time. And what TFN, what we're saying is we sort of carry the cautious approach in terms of risk appetite. So meaning in terms of the Orange Book definition, a preference for safe business delivery options. So willing to tolerate a degree of risk in selecting which activities to undertake to achieve its key deliverables. And then we've obviously, on the sort of scoring matrix that we have, you can see we've incorporated the dotted line. So we're saying anything that's very low or medium is sort of covered within the acceptable level of risk. But anything that's sort of higher than that is unacceptable. And what do we put in place then to ensure risks are proactively being managed? So for the very high section of this, we've put in place, obviously you've got your controls, mitigation actions and fallback plans. So how can we, in terms of a fallback plan, how can we, if a risk materialises, reduce its impact? These risks then must be escalated to the senior responsible owner or the functional director and considered for reporting to operating board. Should it feed into decision-making processes, or in terms of, is the mitigation actions within other functions of TFN that should be considered? And high follows a similar approach in terms of its controls and mitigations to reduce and manage the risk, and then again to be considered for escalation to SRO or functional director. And then obviously we have the medium and low risks that are still obviously being managed through the process, with controls and mitigation actions in place. So within the risk appetite, although we're saying we have a cautious approach, there is exceptions to that where we're saying we're risk averse, which is activities that are undertaken that are considered to virtually carry no risk. And the reason for this is because it could be sort of catastrophic for the organisation. Those specific areas are things like compliance with relevant laws and regulations, health and safety, information technology and cyber security. So that's what's been updated in terms of the risk appetite statement there. Then moving on to, we've updated, so the risk management process that we follow, it's still the same process, but we have updated the diagram for simplification and clarification purposes really. So it is an iterative process which we follow in terms of establishing the context, looking at the internal environment and the external environment, identifying risk, ensuring the appropriate scores, impacts and probabilities are assigned, and the risk treatment levels, and then ensuring continuous communication of risk and monitoring control. So that's that section. Then we've updated section on mitigation actions. So we have clearly defined 3 levels now of mitigation actions. We've got the control level, which is your business as usual activities in terms of the processes, procedures, how they're embedded to help sort of mitigate those risks. We've got the mitigate, those generally tend to be ongoing, so actions, but are obviously reviewed to ensure that they remain appropriate. Mitigation actions then that we've put in place to reduce the risk down from current to target position. These actions should generally have agreed completion dates with them. And then fallback plans, as discussed earlier, if a risk materialises, how can we possibly reduce its impacts? The next area that we looked at is risk reporting. So in terms of the triangle, we have updated the triangle. At the bottom there, it used to be project and programme board, which we no longer have. So we've got the projects and functional teams with risk registers at that level. There is opportunity to escalate those risks if required up to operating board for discussion, which could then feed into decision making or scoring criteria if required. Corporate risks are shared, top-down, bottom-up approach, so visibility across the organisation of all corporate risks. And then also we have key corporate risks and project risks are included as part of the operating report. Now, something that we have updated this time round is we've updated the roles of operating board, Audit and Governance Committee, and TFM board within the Constitution. And as defined by those roles, we've looked at this sort of how we report. So historically, we've reported everything in terms of risk to every governance platform. Something that we've looked at is for TFM board, they've received section 1 of the corporate risk register, which is the executive summary. It's the dashboard of all the themes, and it's the key risks that are driving those themes and a summary of those mitigation actions. Audit and governance would see the corporate risk register and the risk management strategy, and operating board would have visibility of the corporate risk register when it's updated quarterly, updates to the risk management process. And then obviously in terms of if we have risks that we need to escalate at project level for discussion, it may be that would need to be put on the agenda for the monthly OBT meetings that we have. Then in terms of the operating report, this will be quarterly reporting of very high and high project risks with corporate considerations as well. So another area that we've included this time is roles and responsibilities. It's very important that risk is embedded across the organisation, as everyone has a key part to play within risk management. So we've incorporated the roles and responsibilities in terms of managing risks across TFM. And then the last thing that we've updated is the Racy Chart. So who's responsible, accountable, who do we consult and who do we inform in terms of the risk activities? And then obviously you can see across there the roles and then who's the accountabilities. And that diagram has been updated as well within the strategy. So any questions on the risk management strategy before I go on to the updated risk register?
I think we're good, Daniela, thank you.
Just to sort of communicate as well, we have obviously made a number of changes to the risk management strategy, and there's going to be training rolled out to staff within the next month on this. So moving on to the risk register then now. So in terms of the executive summary, in terms of TFN's risk environment and emerging risks, budget setting and business planning is now concluded. We're recognising the fact that obviously the fiscal environment at the moment, with the sort of rise of cost of inflation, we're closely monitoring the funding risks and the risks associated with this. We've captured two risks within this area, one at functional level and one at corporate level. And the one at functional level is around, obviously we capture a budget captured at the most reasonable assumptions at a sort of set point in time. Therefore, the risk is that the reality is different to what's assumed in the budget. And there's a number of actions that are put in place there around sort of reforecasting on a periodic basis, the budget environment process, continual review of its external environment, and the budgeting monitoring process as well. So the corporate risk, the new corporate risk that we've captured here is around funding allocations for 23-24 might be a flat rate, which doesn't account for inflation. Therefore, it could present us with medium to 3 years sustainability challenges. So another area that we're looking at as well in the autumn is obviously TFN will be preparing the business plan for 23-24. And that's based on obviously the planning assumptions that underpins the work that has been done this financial year. Obviously continuing to working closely with DFT and that early engagement on the business planning for 23-24 is a priority. And then, as discussed, you know, we've this has been sort of raised a number of times. I know it was raised at Audit and Governance Committee in July, and it's something that we'd actually increased. And it's the political uncertainty. We have a risk around commitments, changes in government commitments, and that probability of that risk has increased. Obviously, as we gain further clarity, you know, we will look at the sort of scoring of that risk and ensure that it's updated to reflect the external environment. So some of the key changes that have been made to the corporate risk register this time round are, we've done a thorough review across TFN, and the corporate risks reflect the key performance indicators and business objectives that are outlined in the business plan. And you'll notice within the risk register itself there is an extra column where we have aligned the KPIs to the corporate risks, and additional mitigation actions have been put in where required. Within the theme TFN reputation, political engagement and effectiveness, again we've just discussed that change around the change of government commitments. We've also raised one new risk here and two opportunities. Now the risk actually links in with one of the opportunities, so there is a risk of complying with governance and corporate processes, and this is linked to the sort of redesign of TFN. And obviously, as we redesign, can we make things simpler in terms of the processes and policies and procedures that we have? Can we become more smart, more efficient, based on being a more focused organisation? So in terms of that compliance piece, how do we, if processes are changed, ensuring that we communicate those change across the organisation, and so we're compliant with governance and corporate processes. So we had an opportunity in around TAME being a centre of excellence. I know this was raised in July around it being a challenge at Audit and Governance, obviously around the resourcing and the funding elements of this. And it is noted, and a TFN working group is being put in place to define areas of expertise which TFN can develop as a centre of excellence, including those funding opportunities as well. I think with this risk of the TAME being a centre of excellence, it's been subsumed now into a wider opportunity for TFN. So in terms of there is other areas such as decarbonisation strategy, freight strategy, transport related social exclusion, where TFN can potentially provide more services and guidance to support national, regional and local partners. So some of the changes that have been made to the funding theme, we have a new funding risk factor, which was discussed earlier around the funding allocations for 23-24 might be a flat rate, which doesn't account for inflation. We had an issue that's now been closed on the funding theme, which was around the one-year funding allocation settlement, and it's been closed as the mitigation actions are now complete based on the funding allocation that we've received. And business planning for 22-23 has concluded and been approved at TFN board in June. We've reduced the risk of funding levels are significantly reduced. We've decreased the probability of this due to TFN receiving a material reduction for 22-23. Moving on to resourcing, 2 new risk factors have been identified within the resourcing theme, and this links to the transition of TFN in terms of the redesign, and it's to do with loss of knowledge and the severance process, along with obviously the voluntary redundancies, losing that knowledge across the business, not just one area. We felt it was important to include it on the corporate risk register. As we move into TFN's new sort of business operating model, we'd expect to see these risks either reduce or be managed more at functional level. So that will be closely monitored. And then we've also, as stated before, we've incorporated fallback plans for very high risks, and the strategy has been updated in a number of areas. These are the sort of KPIs which are included within the business plan for 22-23, and this is the dashboard currently. So you can see here that we've got 11 risk themes. The only risk theme that's moved into very high from high is political reputation, political engagement and effectiveness, and this is due to the political risk that was increased as discussed earlier. We've completed a number of mitigation actions, and you'll notice within the risk register we've added the trend, which gives you what risks have increased, or are new in period or completed in terms of mitigation actions. And we've got a number of mitigation actions that are due for review for completion in September. And these are the key risk factors that are currently driving those themes above. So we can see that the resources theme, the recruitment and retention of staff, funding is around the receiving the flat rate, and a summary of what mitigation actions are being done to manage these risks. This was raised at Audit and Governance in July, and we've done a rework on some articulation of this risk with interim strategy and programme director in terms of the STP that will be endorsed by TFN board and government in time. Then we have the TAME, legal and commercial restrictions, the risk we've discussed around changing government's commitments, and then also the reduced role in rail industry. So they're the key risk factors that are driving those themes on the dashboard. And then we go into the detail of each of those areas and the mitigation actions that have been assigned. And as stated before, you'll see that there's 2 new columns this time in terms of the KPIs. Some of them will link to some of the risks linked to all the KPIs. Some you'll see will link to multiple, and some may just link to single KPIs. And then you've got the trend analysis down this side in terms of risks that have increased or decreased or that are new. I think that's everything, unless anyone wants me to go into any more detail on any of those risks, or if anyone's got any questions.
Colleagues, fire away. Kevin, hi. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Really comprehensive presentation. Danielle, it's really impressed with the overall approach. Just a couple of questions, really.
Yeah.
One following on from my comments at the last committee meeting around the sort of centre of excellence concept and how we might build capacity. I still think that's obviously a relevant opportunity, but also a relevant question mark against it. It was just a question of clarity, really. Is the risk register now sort of suggesting that the autumn submission is part of how we might mitigate that risk around the opportunity, really, to build capacity? So I was a bit unclear about that. So if you could clarify that would be really helpful. And then a second sort of, I suppose, perhaps an observation rather than a question was around the co-sponsor arrangements, and where it seems to be that the sponsor board will sign off with ministers, as I read it, will sign off the arrangements in December, but which felt a little bit back to front, really. You know, I'd have thought that we'd agreed the arrangements first and then the terms of reference and get that agreed up front with ministers rather than the other way around. But it may be just my reading of that.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that one, Kevin. In terms of that first one, in terms of the question you've got about the Centre of Excellence piece, we'll just have a quick look at that now. So, obviously, we've got the sort of associated mitigation. So, in terms of the autumn 22-23 business plan, that doesn't. In terms of, obviously, that's being prepared within in the autumn. So, in terms of whether the Centre of Excellence piece will feed into that, we could probably let you know next time round. But in terms of the mitigation
Daniela,
action,
could I just add something you just said there?
Yeah.
Just in terms of Centre of Excellence, Kevin, so the department have recognised that early clarity around what's involved in Centre of Excellence and what it actually means has been aired recently. So Tim, who's on the call, and I'm sure Tim would probably pipe up on the second point in relation to co-sponsorship, but they requested a view on what would Centre of Excellence look like. They've got their own views as to what Centre of Excellence would look like in terms of supporting the LTAs, and we took that on board, but also felt there was an opportunity to explore what would a Centre of Excellence look within STB. So could we support in areas like the Common Analytical Framework? So if we're very good at modelling, you know, why not take on a lead role in relation to modelling for all STBs as opposed to getting everyone to repeat the same thing? So there's information being gathered now by the department in relation to I suppose migrating towards a Centre of Excellence that would see the appropriate bodies with the appropriate funding to put the appropriate mechanisms in place to deliver it. So it's a classic case, isn't it? Is that we, you know, to be a Centre of Excellence, you need resource, and to get the resource, you need the funding. And I think the department are comfortable with that, and hence the dialogue as we speak right now. That's happening. So that's Centre of Excellence. Tim, I know Tim's on the call. Tim, did you want to comment on the point from Kevin around co-sponsorship, or could you comment actually?
Yeah, and just add very briefly on the sense of excellence stuff, because I think Paul's covered it very nicely where we are. I think one of the critical and early messages to the department has been, yeah, we're entirely up for this. There's a huge amount of added value that this organisation could bring, particularly local transport authorities and to other STBs, but it has to be done in terms of a sustainable, clear, coherent funding settlement for TFN. I think what we need to avoid is being given lots of small pots to do things over a short period of time, because that's just a recipe for confusion and limited progress. Yeah, on sponsorship, I'm not sure I heard all the questions, so forgive me if this isn't quite right. It is a process that's been led by DFT, with TFN feeding in and it being governed by a joint sponsor board between TFN officials and DFT officials. I think when that board met in August, the conclusion was what needs to happen was, given that we're effectively a new government and certainly new ministers in the Department for Transport, DFT officials do need some time to engage with their ministers first, to be clear about the sort of range of options that their ministers are comfortable with before it comes back to the TFN board. And given that it will need to be on both, it'll have to be agreed on both sides for it to be taken forward. So in some ways we could do it either way around, but actually engaging with ministers first does actually help us and give us a slightly more efficient process.
Kevin, are you okay with that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what's being said. I suppose it just still leaves a question mark against the sort of status of the current sponsor board, in that it's a work in progress, isn't it, from what's being said, and that there needs to be a bit of that to-ing and fro-ing between TFN and new ministerial team, etc. And I accept that, but I'm not quite sure how that sort of risk then needs to sort of reflect that position. But it was a helpful clarification. But I still think it means that as the risk register currently sits, it doesn't quite reflect that for me, because I shouldn't need to be seeking that clarification if you see what I mean, if I'm making sense there. So I'll leave it at that. Don't want to be too pedantic.
Thank you. And just to offer some brief, hopefully reassurance. I mean, I think the board itself has taken a very clear position about what it expects to see in terms of sponsorship arrangements, and that's framed the discussion that's happening with DFT officials. And we are very actively while these processes are being set up, talking to the department about a number of issues around HS2 and NPR, and indeed the Chair, Lord McLaughlin, has written to both the Secretary of State and the new Prime Minister in recent weeks on both issues. So work is continuing in terms of the sponsor arrangement, not least that and the analytical programme with the TAME team. But you're right, I think that getting the mechanics and the detail of the sponsorship agreement feels like it's going to take a bit more time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily the risk register can be expected to capture all of that. I'm sure colleagues would agree with that point. I think perhaps it's a case of providing some clarity around that frame within which uncertainty is being considered. I think that's probably the purpose of the risk register at this. To pick up Tim's point just there. Did you have anything else, Kevin, on risk register or risk strategy document?
I'm fine with that. Fine with everything else. Thank you.
Okay. Other colleagues, Liam, Hans? Okay. Grant, Daniela, can I just echo what Kevin started with in respect of what you provided in terms of its comprehensive nature? It feels a very relevant set of documents, particularly when you read it alongside the business plan. And I think that's always a really good test of any risk document. It needs to make, I think it does. And I particularly like the summary document that you shared alongside the risk register and the strategy document. So please don't stop doing that summary document. I find that particularly helpful. It does get you to where you need to be very quickly. So very helpful.
Thanks very much for that.
And you mentioned in the detail, but I don't think in the narrative, in the voiceover, that there is an audit taking place now or over the next period, looking specifically at risk management maturity. So hopefully we can take some learning from that and have another update very soon.
Yes, definitely. The audit started on Tuesday and it's due to end on Friday with some obviously some feedback within the next sort of few weeks, which will be good.
Excellent, thank you. So if colleagues are happy to move on, just to emphasise the flexibility for today, I believe Alex, you have a deadline of 3 o'clock. So can I suggest, Paul, that we take Alex's summary of internal audit before business plan, just to allow Alex to cover it without feeling too pressured. Is that okay?
Thank you ever so much for that. Thank you. So just in regards to internal audit, we've got 2 papers to present to you today. The first one is our progress report, which documents our progress against the current audit plan. We've finalised 1 report since the last meeting, and that is the payroll review, which I'll touch upon in the second paper from that perspective. There are no, as I said, we're still quite early on in terms of the delivery of the audit plan. So at present, there are no specific themes to pull out as part of delivering the audit plan, and that's set out in section 2.2 of our progress paper. I've been liaising with Paul in regards to the follow-up review, which was presented at the last committee. There were a small number of actions which were ongoing, obviously had management assurance around particular pen testing. So again, that's something we'll just be following up and reporting to you in terms of the validation of that particular point. As I know that was a key area of linking to your cyber review. In Appendix A of our progress report, we highlight where we are in terms of delivering the audit plan. As has been mentioned already, the risk maturity review is ongoing at this point in time, and we are due to start our Gdpr review on the 7th of November. That's been confirmed as a start date. We had a move round in terms of Gdpr and payroll, as you recall, at the last meeting, as just a timing change from that perspective. There is 1 audit which we're in discussion about and linking to some of the comments that were made at the last meeting around making sure our audit plan continues to be reflect your risk profile and changes in your risk profile. And there's 1 particular review we're just discussing is around health and safety framework, recognising when we put this developed this plan, there was still working in the office, there was still decisions to be made around the arrangements and where staff would be working. So we're reconsidering whether that is the right review and thinking about whether there's any areas that need further attention relating to your risk profile from that perspective. So I said in terms of that, there's still some further discussions, and Graham will liaise with yourself in terms of any particular changes in between the committee meetings, if that's okay from that perspective. There's no other further updates I'd like to share with you in regards to progress paper, but I'm happy to take any questions on the progress to date.
Colleagues, over to you.
Okay.
Are we happy? Alex, just on that point, Yeah, one of the things that I couldn't help doing when I read through the material that came through ahead of the meeting was looking at the risk register, looking at the audit plan, and looking at the risk register, looking at the audit. And I know the audit plan is focused on control effectiveness. I think there is more that we can do in terms of creating that linkage between risk themes and audit plan. I think one of the areas management were considering potentially dropping the health and safety review. I think one of the areas that you could consider in terms of control would be around project and program level controls, because that's obviously fundamental to a good deal of activity, core activity. So it would be something that spoke directly to risk themes and also something that was consistent with a focus on control environment. Two-bird approach.
No.
But yes, thank you.
Thank you for your input. I certainly take that forward with our next catch up with Paul. So that's absolutely fine in terms of scoping and consideration. Okay. Thank you. If you're happy for me to move on to the detailed report. No further questions. Okay. So the report that you have in your pack today is payroll. Overall, a very positive review, substantial assurance. This looks at your key controls in regards to payroll. So looks at the starter process changes, terminations, the core controls that we'd expect to see from a payroll review, but also the authorization process and month-end reviews and segregation of duties from that perspective. Overall, I said there's no actions included within this review, so overall positive perspective. Within Appendix B, we've included data analytics, so we look at various data, so payroll variances, gross pay, net pay, and tax, and look if there's any anomalies or any particular periods or types, categories that stand out from an anomaly perspective. There's no concerns in regards to the analytics work that was undertaken in regards to those areas. So overall, there's a positive position in regards to this. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions on the payroll audit? We happy? I've got a couple of comments, Alex, not questions.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the particularly pleasing and relevant is the testing covered levers. That was something that I was, having been made redundant twice in my career. I'm very conscious of how good and bad that process can be. So it's good to see that you covered that element. I think the other point is that particularly where you've got an audit report that doesn't necessarily flag up any particular action, it's very easy for the audit report to become something of a non-event. And exception-based reporting is often a non-event in such cases. So I'd like to thank you for including the level of detail that you have around the testing that you've done, because that helps committee to consider the effectiveness of the audit activity, and it supports our assurance that we subsequently pass on to the board. So from my perspective, that's exactly the kind of detail we need, even where a report doesn't necessarily flag any action. Grand. So is that you wrapped up, Alex?
It is. Thank you very much, and thank you for rejigging the agenda slightly for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thank you. So I think we're back to you, Paul, in terms of operating plan, are we not?
This is moving on to item 5, which is the business plan. Yeah.
Business plan. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, what we'd picked up previously was the committee talked about KPIs and obviously we had monthly operating reports that were being submitted, but we kind of felt that it would be useful for the committee to formally see the business plan, and to get an upfront view as to what were considered to be the higher priorities faced by the business in the next 6 months. And also, as you can see when you've read it, it also flags future years as well, and the sort of the emerging agenda in relation to future years. I've included it mainly for information for committee members to review, and one of the key people in its compilation was, I don't know if everyone knows Tim, who spoke before. Tim's the strategy director, and obviously is an instrumental person in relation to quite a lot of the activities in there in relation to STP, MPIR, decarb, freight strategy. So there's a lot in there that would have a direct that Tim would have direct input to, and Tim's kindly agreed to join us today if there are any detailed questions. I'm hoping Tim is still there. Yeah. Has Graham dropped off?
Sorry,
it's fine. It's fine. So I was just seeking questions from members in relation to the plan.
Yeah, I thought it was a great read, actually, in terms of it being informative for folk outside the organisation specifically. I did notice you would expect me to turn directly to the KPIs, and I did. The list of KPIs appears to be somewhat incomplete on page 28. So the list of KPIs in the risk register goes through to March. It has more than 13. The list that I see on the plan only goes to 13. So I think that there may be a missing part page in that document.
We'll have a look at that.
I mean, it doesn't qualify as value add in terms of feedback, but I'd share it with you.
I think that might well fall with me, because I'm pretty sure Daniel asked me for a version of the KPIs at a point in time, and I just need to clarify whether we subsequently modified the business plan slightly. But I'll pick that up.
Okay. Is there anything else from anybody on the business plan? Okay.
Kevin was
Chair.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry,
Kevin was going to come in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, I suppose, a bit of an observation, really, and it's really useful to see the business plan. So thanks for that. I suppose a question really around how does this sort of influence our work programme going forward as a committee, and should it? I suspect it ought to. Is it fully captured in the risk register? And I ask that because I noticed in both the business sort of plan going forward this year and what we expect to see in 23-24 refers to EV charging. That's a big sort of a big agenda, I guess, for us going forward. And yet I don't think we've captured that in any of our discussions thus far around this particular committee, and I don't think there's an explicit reference to it in the risk register. So I just wonder whether it's perhaps something that we need to just come back to at some point in terms of looking at that cross connectivity between the business plan, our work programme, our forward look, and the risk register. It's just, it's not really a question, I guess, just an observation.
If I could just come back, I think one of the things that we found really useful is the feedback that we've had from the various sources, and we really welcome the feedback from the committee members, because I think we acknowledge it's not perfect. We've been through quite a strange year this year in terms of the timing of in fact, if anything, the risk register's got ahead of the business plan, which is quite bizarre. But that's just the nature of the year. I think what we're trying to do now is to go into a more conventional year. So we're about to initiate business planning now, which would see it concluding towards the back end of the year, and it then feeding into risk registers accordingly. But I think your point about the future years is a very valid point. Is that there is information in there in relation to direction of future years, and equally that should feed into risk registers. So you're right, it is a mission, and we'll pick that up.
Great, thanks. Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Just picking up on the point that Kevin's brought up there about EV charging. This is a major infrastructure headache, really, for local transport authorities. It's not that TfN will be asked to deliver any, but obviously the transport authorities working through TfN and looking for support from TfN. It's a case of either working with individual contractors or companies or providers that are doing it on our highways and in and around our towns, cities and villages, or looking to ask government for to support this. But we are I know in much of the north of England, we are well behind where we should be with this initiative. I think there's going to have to be some closer working relationships with both TfN, local transport authorities, and the government to ensure we can catch up on this programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. I think just where we sort of kicked the meeting off in terms of trying to make sure that we picked up some of the detail that came out of the last meeting that we had and the discussion that we had. I think Andrea, Paul, Gary, between you, if we can make sure that particular point is captured in the minutes, but also that we pick it up as a point at the next meeting, because you may by then have had time to consider whether and how it feeds into the risk register, etc. Just so that we don't lose it. Hans, over to you.
Yeah, I think similar to what Keith had to say there is I think we're drifting into an ad hoc way of actually looking at our transport. So rather than transport for the north, we become to districts doing their own thing, government doing a different thing, and us trying to coordinate it. So I think we need to find some way where we can have some sort of overview of everything that's going on and try and link everybody together, so we don't have the ad hoc way of actually getting a northern transport plan together. It seems to be disappearing from actually an overall northern plan and becoming into basically what you can, people doing what they can with what they can get. And I think that's not a way we should be running a country, particularly not the north and the north uptake of actually building back and getting us back on our feet and then levelling up all the things you want to, the strap lines you want to put to it. Is we need to have a proper infrastructure and we need to have a proper plan of how we're going to build for the future.
Yes, so I think from a strategic perspective, I mean that kind of speaks to that wider risk of TfN's relevance and ongoing viability, I suppose. Tim, I presume you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, apologies, my camera's not working. I'll stay off camera. I think absolutely. I think there are sort of three dimensions to what Councillor Mundy's just set out in terms of what's going on at the moment. I think firstly is that the department is looking at its guidance for local transport plans, and through that, for the first time, wanting to define the role of subnational transport bodies like TfN in general, but specifically for us as a statutory body. And again, we're feeding into that process, and I think that's where, particularly actually around areas around decarbonisation and we were talking about EV charging infrastructure earlier. It's exactly in that space where there's a real opportunity, I think, to sort out and bring some clarity to that. So that's one thing. I think secondly, as TFN updates and refreshes the statutory plan for the North, which we are doing over the next sort of 6 to 9 months within the team, that's equally the opportunity to set out very clearly those things where the North is going to decide to take a collective view about things, whether it and again what it is that TFN as an organisation is doing to support local transport authorities, and indeed areas where we're stepping back and leaving that to LTAs, and it's an area where certainly in the new strategic transport plan relative to the first one that was agreed, there's an opportunity now to be much more specific about all of that. And I think my third point comes back to the funding and the business plan for the next 2 financial years, and what we say to DFT in the autumn about all of that. That I think that the EVCI work is a really good example where we did get some funding last year to be able to make a start, and the team have made an enormous progress, huge amount of progress, particularly analytically and in understanding the challenges and the issues. We have an additional pot of funding this year from the department, which will enable us to take that on to a second stage. Hopefully, I think then starting to get much more into what is it we are doing actively to support implementation on the ground, working with your officers. Again, we have no long-term certainty from the department that we'll have the funding to do that, and I think that sort of comes back to the point I made earlier around centres of excellence, that actually getting our finances and our funding onto a sustainable basis alongside a very clear view agreed with the board, but also with the department, with ministers, about what TFN is here to do. It's where we all want to get to, and the more progress we can make over the next 12 months in the next financial year, I think, Paul, getting to that point, the better place TFN will be in.
Is it okay if I just come back in that, if you don't mind? Can I just make another point on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just. I think the point I was trying to get there is we need to have a for the North, not just for TFN, but we need to have a northern view and a streamline of regular funding where we know it's there for the plans. Because the process we have, particularly comes local authorities, it becomes ad hoc bidding against each other for bits of money to try to do projects within our areas, and it doesn't seem to be a well thought out way of doing things. Instead of putting our resources to make sure we get a northern vision delivered, we end up bidding against each other to try and get bits of funding to try and do individual schemes, and not necessarily linked up with actually the whole northern vision. So it becomes to be like a beauty contest of who can get what they can, rather than a strategic plan of how to improve the whole North. It's just my observations on it.
I would fully support that, Hans. We spend more time and more that achieves nothing in putting bids together. We spend literally millions of pounds over a number of years bidding and achieving absolutely nothing. It's a disgraceful way to run funding opportunities. Thanks, Chair.
Yes. Conscious that we don't want to lose those points or that theme. So I am keen that we reflect on that and think about how we can pick it up again next time as we discuss updates to the risk register. Perhaps that's probably the hook. Great, thank you. I think we are lucky to finish by 3:30, but hopefully folk can stay with us. Some folk can stay with us after that. So I think we're on to the external audit view. So Karen and Campbell, you shared the audit report. So over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly run through the report, which was circulated with the papers. Hopefully just pull together the key points for you and not labour it too much. It is a fairly lengthy report, for which I apologise. That's kind of a function of the professional standards that we're required to report to you under. We intend, as it stands at the moment, to issue an unqualified opinion on Transport for the North's accounts. There is a very small amount of work outstanding. It's not particularly significant, and it's actually not in the gift of Transport for the North for us to finish that work, so it sits elsewhere, which I'll come back to in a minute. I also want to say that the accounts that we received were of good quality. They were supported by good working papers, and as we would expect and have experienced in previous years, we've had really good cooperation and support from the team. So our thanks are due to Paul and his staff, who have worked with us through the audit to try and get us to a conclusion. You will see listed in the report a small amount of work outstanding. One of those relates to pensions assurance. That's because we are waiting for the pension fund auditor to provide assurance to us on the work that they've done, which underpins the information that your actuary uses to give you information which you include in your accounts. I am expecting that to be received by from the pension fund auditor by the end of next month. I was optimistic we would have it by now, but unfortunately we haven't. And you will see that we have mentioned that there is a review of the narrative report that's still outstanding. It was outstanding at the point that we drafted this report, but it's now done, and there is nothing for you to be aware of from that. So subject to then our final review and completion of the file, the audit is complete. We are required by professional standards to tell you about any changes in our audit approach, and I'm pleased to say there's nothing significant. The only thing to draw to your attention is that materiality changed during the course of the audit. When we did our draft plan, when we did our audit plan, which we presented to you previously at the July meeting, we'd based that on last year's accounts, but obviously Transport for North's gross operating expenditure is reduced, and so because we use a performance benchmark based on a percentage of your spend, that means there is a reduction in your materiality as well. So it's gone down from 1.2 million to just over 1 million. Again, not significant, because as you'll see from the reporting, there isn't very much to draw to your attention. You will recall when I came to the July meeting that I presented to you the audit strategy memorandum, which set out the risks that we'd identified. I talked through, I think at the time, how we identify risks, so it's linked very much in this context to risks that the numbers in the accounts may be wrong. What we've done here is take those same risks and then set out for you in summary form at least the work that we have performed. So just to remind you of those and to confirm where we are. Management override of controls is the first risk. I think I probably told you in July, but I'll repeat it anyway because I think it's important members understand that that is a risk driven by professional standards. So I am required to spend some time looking at the risk that management have overridden the controls and so on that operate within the organisation in order to drive a particular outcome in terms of financial statements. Typically that would happen through journals that have been posted but shouldn't have been, through the use of estimates where there are biases in the decision making around how to calculate estimates, or because of the way in which any unusual transactions have been accounted for. And I'm pleased to say that we've completed all the work that we needed to do in that respect, and there are no matters arising. Probably just worth saying, it is a risk driven by professional standards, not by anything I am particularly concerned about with Transport for the North. So it appears in every audit strategy memorandum, and it gets attention from all auditors. The second area was around pensions, and again, just to confirm, we are awaiting confirmation from the pension fund auditor on the work that they've done to ensure that the actuaries use the right information. What I can tell you is that the information that you've got in your accounts is that which the actuary provided to you. So once I've closed that loop about the actuary having the right stuff in the first place, I'm comfortable that your accounts will be okay. You will see on page 13 the other areas around the audit that I'm required to report on, and I'm pleased to say that there is nothing there to draw to your attention. We've commented in there on the quality of the accounts, which I mentioned at the start. You will see that we didn't have any significant difficulties in completing our work, and again, hopefully that came through at the start of my presentation when I talked about the cooperation from the team. And I'm pleased to say that this year at least you have had no contact from members of the public who wish to exercise their rights to inspect your accounts or the supporting records. We have raised one issue in respect of internal control that arises from work that my colleagues have done around access to your IT systems, and it's to do with the promptness of the removal of a lever from your systems. Management have provided a response that indicates that that's not a significant issue. So again, comfortable that there's nothing that I need to really pull out there for you. You will see we have listed in the report the errors that we have discussed with management but which haven't been amended. There is just one at this stage, which is the issue in respect of depreciation rate that was incorrect. So you've charged depreciation a little faster than you needed to. The upshot of that is that you've got an understatement of your position for this year, but it's not significant. And as long as you're comfortable with that, we don't propose to ask for a change. And then the final point really is just that on there you will see there was an amendment to your disclosure notes in respect of related parties. The accounts that you published on your website earlier in the year for the public to inspect included a transaction, very, very small value, which isn't actually correct. It related to last year rather than this year, so that's now been removed. There's nothing else I need to draw to your attention. I'm just going to briefly mention value for money because we identified a potential risk in respect to financial sustainability around Transport for the North's arrangements. Our work to date suggests that there's nothing that we need to pull out for you further to that. I think we probably all recognise the pressure that the organisation is under, and we will report formally to you in due course. We are, as a matter of course, asking for a letter of representation from you. We will ask for that at the date that we're ready to sign our audit report, but a draft of that letter is provided for you now. The purpose of the letter of representation, if you like, is for you to confirm formally in writing that you've answered all of my questions and you've told me everything I need to know. It's so that I can get assurance around the things that would be otherwise really difficult to evidence. There's nothing unusual in that report this year other than that we have asked for an explicit confirmation that you have considered the impact of the invasion of Russian forces in Ukraine on your operations, and that you are satisfied there are no transactions that would fall foul of the sanctions regulations. I'm comfortable that there aren't, and we wouldn't expect there to be any, but we have asked the question. And then the other thing is that the letter of rep asks you to confirm that you're comfortable not amending the accounts for the error that I mentioned earlier in respect to the depreciation that had gone through at the wrong rate. I'm going to stop there, I think, and give you the opportunity to ask me any questions if you'd like, because Campbell, who is your audit manager, is also on the call. So if there's anything really, really technical, we'll be flying that over to Campbell to answer because he's much closer to the detail of the work, as you'd expect. But happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Aaron, thank you. Over to colleagues for questions.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question. I just wanted to make a comment. Obviously, the financial area has gone through a major change in this last 12 months with Ian leaving. And I would just like to, say a big thank you on behalf of, I think, the board, and I'm sure you'll support that, Chair, in the fact that they've come together, they've produced the documents, and listening to Karen there, they've done again a cracking job in keeping us where we need to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. Kevin.
Just a question, Karen, if I may, on the timeline for sort of signing off, and then presumably we're recommending this to board, or we're just noting the report. And in terms of that, the significant risk in undervalue for money that you flag for in respect to financial sustainability going forward, I suppose just a concern from this committee's perspective that we're in the middle of 22-23 now, aren't we? So to some respect, this report's retrospective, and you're flagging that as a significant risk. And I know we've captured it in the risk register, but it is something I think that this committee needs to sort of keep to the forefront, really, doesn't it, going forward? I'm sure it's a concern for the board as well. But it that's one of the things that really sticks out for me, really, in your report, that we were able to mitigate the risk last year, as you outline in the paragraph, but it's whether we're in that, we have that capacity to mitigate any shortfall within this year. So I guess it's just something we need to keep on our radar.
Chair, Paul's got his hand up, so I wonder if Paul wants to speak first, because I think he may have comments on the timeline in particular that are helpful.
Yeah. So in relation to the timeline, Kevin, Campbell phoned me earlier in the week and mentioned the fact that the pension audit was probably not going to get completed by the end of September. And this is an issue that we face every year. Well, so it's not an issue; it's just a fact. It's a timing fact. And I think it has been recognised that so the timeline for submission has been extended to November. What we felt, if we could get it done by September, it's just a good thing to do. Get it done, get it signed and sealed, get the accounts published. Now that would be 2 months ahead, but it's also contingent upon everything else fitting, whether the audit can be completed in time, whether the pension funds or not. And part of the reason why those dates were extended was because of the very pressures that were placed on professional teams. So we were trying to get it done, but we didn't manage it. Now I'm speaking for myself here. I'm at this stage, I wouldn't expect there to be any significant change that comes out of the pension fund audit, but that's not to say that it won't say. It could be a clean audit report and say the pension fund is fine and the reports can be relied upon. It could equally say something different to that. But I think in the past it has said that everything is clean and therefore the reports can be relied upon. So I'm proposing that the committee does approve the accounts subject to the receipt of the audit report from the pension fund. And then it also recommends to the board that the board would approve them subject to as well. Now, and the logic for that is that we would expect there to be a clean audit report. But if there isn't, and the accounts need to be adjusted, we'll then have to go through the process again. We'll have to adjust the accounts, have discussion with the ANG members, and then resubmit to the board. But on the basis that event is possibly unlikely, we felt that we could recommend to the board that the accounts are approved subject to the receipt of a report that would require no adjustment to the accounts. Does that give you some confidence around the?
That's really helpful, Paul. Yeah, that's clarified that for me. Thank you.
And in terms of value for money, I mean, this was so the question that was raised by the external auditors was around, can you demonstrate to us, why you've got a degree of financial security going forward, and so it was a forward look that we were presenting. And a lot of it's based upon the memorandum of understanding. There is an MOU in place from the department that says they will continue to support us until the stage that they don't. And so there's the memorandum of understanding is the critical piece, followed by the level of reserves that we've had as a consequence of grant being higher than was needed in previous years. And I've said before, and I think I'll say it again. I think having reserves creates a bit of a problem. It's a bit of an opportunity for us to supplement, and have a sort of a slightly higher run rate in spend. But it muddies the water. The department is our funder. And our sole funder, whether that be historically or on a year-to-year basis. So the MOU is a critical document. The discussions that we're having with the department are very encouraging because again we're talking about growth and adding on services, which again is very positive. And the timing of those discussions are occurring now in relation to next year. So it is positive, and I'm certainly. Compared to where we were a year ago was a lot of uncertainty. There was a reduction, but we've embedded that in now. We've gone through some pain in terms of the reduction of workforce, but we're now in a position that we've got a good, strong workforce, an acceptable plan going forward, and the department seems very supportive of it.
Thanks for that, Paul.
Points for Karen or technical points for Campbell? There was one point that I was particularly interested in the levers point around data access or systems access. having been so interested to see levers included in the internal audit report, I was equally interested to see levers reference within the. And I guess, irrespective of the assurances that you've received from management, this is really a comment back to Daniela and Paul, perhaps, is we've got redundancy, we've got loss of knowledge, acknowledge the risk register. This is potential data loss. That prevention is a big area of controls, a big behavioural point within organisations. So maybe it is worth just looking back at the risk register and thinking from a management perspective, is there anything that we should be adding in there around data loss, not just in respect of redundancy programs per se, data loss as a topic?
So we have, Graham, we've got data loss covered as part of the, so within the cyber security section, we've got a data loss risk that's included there.
Bless you. I should have looked back, Daniela, but I didn't. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. And again, in terms of likelihood, that sort of that perhaps increases during this particular period of
Definitely, I think it's heightened due to obviously the transitional period that we're going through, and you'd expect in time when we move into the new sort of operating model that would reduce.
Yes, grand.
So if I could just come back in relation to the point you made, Graham, I think what's really useful from our perspective is to get continuous feedback. We'd like a perfect environment, but there are times that it isn't. And I think, but the risk here was quite low in that, in fact, it was very low because the functionality of the individual was gone, but they were still on the system. So it's a point well taken. They shouldn't be on. We should have a process that sees them removed as well as the functionality going as well. So it's a point well taken. I think just going back to something that Karen raised when she first came on the call was that she was very thankful and praised the work that we'd done, and I think equally I'd like to reiterate how effective the working relationship has been with Mazars, and having a continuity in the team has been extremely useful, because our accounts don't change that much, and then having a bit of consistency within the team has made it work very, very well, and the interface has proved very, very effective. We are in the middle of the PSAA, who we use to appoint the auditors, are going through their procurement process as we speak, and we would certainly hope, and I'm not sure whether we can, but we would hope that the relationship continues, because it's very effective.
And Campbell, I think you were.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just before I go, really, and I suppose Paul's just repeated that again. I just really wanted to sort of express my sort of personal thanks for Paul and David in particular, and the rest of his team for a very smooth audit and very few audit findings, and just really appreciate all of his support and help on the audit. So thank you very much for that.
Are we happy to move on? Grand, thank you. So, Paul, I think you are taking us through the committee's annual report to the board. You've shared the report document, an extract from a consultation committee terms of reference, and also a tally sheet evidencing the activity against that list.
Yeah, it says 30 minutes. I certainly don't think we need that length of time to do it. So essentially, this is framing the annual report that the board would see, which is giving them a degree of assurance that the committee have done, the work that the committee have done against the remit that they were set, to give the board the confidence to approve the accounts. So it links in quite well to the areas that our external auditors have just aired and mentioned, is that ties in. So there's a report on the external audit, there's a report on the internal audit, there's a report on the accounts preparation, all of which are then considered, and equally there's a report on the annual governance statement. and all of which are considered in the round by the board to say that we're comfortable that the information that's in the financial statements is accurate, and the processes that we've used to compile them are robust and can be relied upon. So this report was just really, I suppose, it's making sure that the committee were comfortable with its content, that we felt it was thorough and complete, and that they would be comfortable that Councillor Little would be able to present that to the board at the 29th of September. Again, we'd have to build in just the point about within the report we capture the principle that there's a risk around the timing of the issue of the audit completion on the pension fund. So would highlight that that risk has become reality, but we would be seeking to approve, still recommending the accounts are approved subject to receipt of a letter that would require no adjustment to the accounts going forward. So nothing else to say, really.
Thanks, Paul. So, Keith, given that you are kindly presenting this item to the board, it only seems fair to ask you first as to if you have any questions.
No, I'm quite confident that we can get this clear to the board. The board fully understands. The members of the board, as those that sit today, will understand the situation we find ourselves in, and it's going to be difficult going forward. I fully appreciate that, but no, I'll be more than happy to present these on your behalf, Graham.
Good.
Thank you. Higgs, are you coming? Statement as written, the report rather. Yep, I'll take that as affirmation. I found it a really good, interesting read, Paul. I like 3.24 in particular, in that it looks ahead. But just one very minor point. Again, apologies for low value addition on it. I think 324 should read 23-24. If it is indeed looking ahead to the next financial year, but I do. When I read the list of points that speak to our intention going forward, I thought they were absolutely the right ones. So,
no, I think that is sorry that yeah, that is talking about the year to which it relates. So it's the
is it? Okay.
Let me just reflect on that.
325. I was assuming that 324 spoke to the forthcoming year rather than. I'll leave that with you. I'm sure you'll get it straight.
Oh, I'll check. Yeah.
Grand. So as part of that paper, Paul, I'm conscious that there are a number of specific assurances that you are seeking. Do you have everything you need from the committee in terms of what you submit and what Keith will present on our behalf?
Yes, we have everything in place. Again, the only thing that we don't have as we speak right now is the final audit report, which is a consequence of receiving the letter, and it comes down to what the letter says in relation to the GMPF. There is a possibility it could say figures need to be adjusted and changed. Then we'll go into that process of revising them, and we'll get that done within the statutory deadline of by the end of November. But we can only deal with that when the letter comes through. But yes, we have everything that we require.
Grand. So the last material item I think on the agenda was the statement of accounts. I think David is still on the call. David was down to speak to it, I believe. The document has been shared.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There isn't really much I can add that hasn't already been said by Karen or Paul, and I don't think there's much merit in actually repeating that. I think it is important that you have, for completeness sake, the up-to-date version of the draft accounts, which, unless something unexpected emerges in the closing of the audit, will be the final accounts for the year. These are the accounts that we are suggesting that committee recommend go forward to the board on the 29th of September for approval. They are substantially the accounts that the committee has seen before. I've mentioned in the cover report 2 very minor adjustments that were made, which again Karen has sort of touched upon. So that sort of tidies up some details in there. Apart from that, they are identical to the accounts you've seen before. So we're pleased to actually get to the end of that drafting process, and thank you for the comments about the work that's gone into them, because it has been a big effort all around, including from the audit side, although Campbell's not here anymore, to get us to this point. Hopefully we can then complete the audit and get this all concluded. Meanwhile, as has previously been discussed, we'd like these are the accounts that we'd like to go forward to the board on the 29th for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Colleagues, any questions for David stroke Paul on that? I mean, there is quite a substantial section on gains, obviously contained within that document, which provides a sort of value for money style read across activities and responsibilities. I did notice that the reference to challenges associated with Racy was still highlighted in yellow. Is that something that we need to discuss further now, or is that just something that is to be confirmed?
You've got me there, Graham. What should be highlighted in yellow is items that were changed, and to the best of my knowledge, there was nothing changed in relation to Racy. It might have been, I mean, unless David can add, I think we might have flagged. Sorry, is this in the main body of the report, not the accounts?
On page 70 in the accounts.
We'll have a look at that if you want separately.
Yeah, I think that's an oversight. We'll double check that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we'll check it separately.
Yeah, and just on the point about the volume of information there, which is governance related, I didn't have time necessarily to do a double check against the Audit Committee report and the governance statement within the accounts. Conscious that similar things are spoken about, perhaps using different terminology and different wording. I just worth if you have the time just to do a double check, just in case we're just to ensure that we're not saying the same thing but using slightly contradictory terms, perhaps.
Chair, I've just jumped to page 70 just to refresh my memory. Yes, sorry. That the reason why that's there is that is actually an amendment to what you have previously seen. So that the yellow points were acknowledging the fact that the item wasn't closed, and that work was required to do to make sure that we manage as much as possible the Racy issue. So again, we extended membership from 3 to 4 elected members, and also we extended the non-executive membership. But I think we've got at least 1 or 2 roles to fill. So it was acknowledging the fact that we've got work to do going forward. I think also what I'd like to do, probably in discussion with yourself, Chair, is just to get the cycle of membership, in a way that would allow people to roll on and roll off, and there to be minimal effect. At one stage, 2 or 3 years ago, we had 3 new members. Kevin, David, and there was a third member at the same time. Chris. Yeah, Chris. All 3 came on at the same time, and which is great for an injection of knowledge, and bringing some new fresh pairs of eyes. But potentially all 3 could roll off at a point in time as well. So again, it's just trying to get people on I suppose cycles that interact, possibly over a 3-year cycle. So that's the kind of thing that's going on behind the scenes. Just to think about ways that we could start, managing away accuracy as an issue.
Yeah, good, excellent. So, David, thank you. Paul, thank you. If nobody else has any comments on the statutory accounts, I think we are item number 10. Date of the next meeting is scheduled, at least on my screen, as the 18th of November as a consultation call, 11 a.m. This all presupposes that we're not needed to relook at elements associated with pension liability, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So I presume that date is in everybody's calendar. That's still the date that we're heading for. Good. Excellent. So I know that we've talked about a number of things, and I've flagged a couple of things requesting for inclusion next time. Does anybody else have anything specific whilst we're all together that they would like to include on the agenda, flag for possible consideration, just so that we've got it now? Can at least capture it in the minutes. No? Good. We happy? Excellent. So unless anybody else has any closing comments or concerns, I think we are at the end. Gary, whatever administrative things you need to do to make this call end, I think you're free to do them. So thank you all, and I'll see you in November.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks, Payroll.
Thank you. Bye.